If you had asked me 6 months ago what the worst day of my life was, I would have said the afternoon my father collapsed in our old brick house in Leeds. The day his tea went cold on the table, and so did he. But grief has a cruel sense of humour, because I didn't know that the day I lost my father was also the day I began losing my marriage. My name is Clara Whitmore, and before everything shattered, I believed my life was painfully ordinary. A small terraced house, a quiet job, a husband who kissed my forehead and made the world think he adored me. But the truth? It wasn't grief that broke me. It wasn't death. It wasn't loss. It was discovering that while I was arranging my father's funeral, my husband was arranging my downfall. It began with small things. A password he changed without telling me. A bouquet delivered to our door addressed to him, signed by a name I didn't recognize. A conversation he cut off the second I walked into the room. I told myself it was stress, grief, anything but betrayal, because admitting the truth would have destroyed me. But betrayal doesn't hide forever, especially when someone you love is studying your grief, calculating your weakness, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. And the perfect moment is when you're too broken to defend yourself. I should have listened to the warning signs. I should have listened to my father. But love makes fools of us all. Before I tell you everything, before I show you how deep this betrayal went, and how my father protected me even after his last breath, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city in the comments. Your voice matters, and no one deserves to face grief or betrayal alone. This is the story of how my world fell apart, and how, somehow, I survived it. If you really want to understand how everything fell apart, you need to know how it all began. Because no betrayal arrives out of nowhere. It grows quietly, like damp behind wallpaper. By the time you finally see the stain, the damage has already reached the foundations. I grew up in a modest red brick house on Woodfield Lane in Leeds. The kind of house people drive past without noticing. Yet for me, it held my entire childhood. My dad, Raymond Whitmore, was a builder. Steady, soft-spoken, with hands rough from decades of lifting timber, and a heart gentle enough to fix anything I broke, from school projects to my teenage heart. My mother, Margaret, died when I was 13. Cancer, quick, brutal, and merciless. I watched my father shrink in those months, as though grief carved pieces out of him, but he never let me see him crumble completely. He used to say, "Clara, love won't always protect you, so you learn to protect yourself." At 13, those words meant nothing. At 34, they became prophecy. After Mum died, Dad raised me alone. He worked long hours on construction sites, but still managed to show up at every school play, every parent meeting, every exam result. He wasn't a perfect man, but he was present, and that mattered more than anything. People often say girls look for men like their fathers. I didn't. I looked for someone kind, someone gentle, someone who wouldn't make noise or chaos in my life. And that's exactly how Daniel appeared when he first walked into the cafe where I used to work part-time. He was charming in the sort of quiet, calculated way that makes you feel chosen. He noticed small things, my chipped nail polish, my habit of tapping my pen against my cup when I was nervous. He made me feel seen. And after years of living with just Dad and silence, being seen felt like being cherished. Daniel worked in finance, a world I never fully understood, but he always made it sound important enough to justify his late nights, his sudden trips, his stress. Our first year together was lovely, actually. He cooked me dinner. He took me to little countryside inns on weekends. He spoke softly, held my hand tightly, and Dad tolerated him. Not disliked, just tolerated, which for my father was practically suspicious. I remember one Sunday lunch, Dad pulled me aside while Daniel was washing dishes. "You sure about him, love?" "What do you mean?" "He watches everything." Men who watch everything aren't always watching to protect. Sometimes they're watching to take. I laughed it off. At 24, I thought I knew more about love than my father ever could. Looking back now, he knew everything. Daniel proposed in the Lake District on a foggy morning. After a night of cheap wine and cheap music from the cottage radio. I said yes because he looked like a man offering forever. And at that age, forever sounded like a promise, not a warning. Dad tried to hide his concerns at the wedding, but I caught the look in his eyes, a mixture of love and fear. Fear that I was stepping into something he wouldn't be able to save me from. The first years of marriage weren't bad. They were quiet, functional, almost comfortable. But comfort can be deceptive, like a soft blanket hiding mold underneath. Looking back, there were signs of the Daniel I would one day meet in full. The way he insisted on handling all finances, claiming I was too emotional with money. The way he dismissed my friendships, saying certain people weren't good influences. The way he criticized my job at a local nursery, calling it sweet but pointless. But at the time, I told myself he was just ambitious, structured, focused. Now I know he was measuring what he could control. Still, I stayed. Because we all stay longer than we should in places where we once felt safe. Dad passed away in late November, the coldest day of the year. The doctor said it was quick, heart failure. But grief is never quick. It lingers in everything, on the staircase he once built, on the tools still hanging in his workshop, in the empty chair beside mine at breakfast. After the funeral, I felt like I was carrying the whole weight of the world on my shoulders. And Daniel, he became distant in a way that didn't feel like grief. It felt like calculation. He wasn't mourning my father. He was waiting for me to be weak enough to do whatever he asked. I didn't know it then, but he had already spoken to a solicitor behind my back, already asked questions about inheritance, estate transfer, shared ownership, already planted seeds of a plan. He would unveil the moment he thought I couldn't fight him. Sometimes I wish the story ended there, with suspicion, red flags, and doubts. But no, that was only the beginning. Before I continue, if any part of this reminds you of something in your own life, a red flag you ignored, a warning someone gave you, share it below. It might help someone who's living the same silence I once lived. Now, let me take you to the day everything shifted forever. There are moments in life you can point to and say, yes, that was the day everything changed. And strangely, it's rarely the loud moments, the shouting, the slamming doors, the dramatic confessions. No, it's the quiet ones, the ones that slip into your life softly, so gently you don't realize your world has split in half, until you're standing in the wreckage. For me, that moment arrived 3 days after my father's funeral. I remember waking to the kind of silence that feels like someone has pressed a pillow over the whole world. I walked through the house barefoot, passing the dusty boxes of sympathy cards, the lilies already beginning to droop, the untouched casserole dishes from neighbors. Grief is heavy. It sits inside your bones, but even grief felt lighter than what I was about to discover. Daniel was sitting at the dining table, shirt ironed, hair styled, as if preparing for a business meeting rather than comforting his grieving wife. He didn't look up when I entered. He simply said, "We need to talk, Clara." 4 simple words. But something in the way he said them made my stomach twist. "What about?" I asked. "The house," he replied. "My house, your father's house, our future." My father's house. The place where he taught me to ride a bike, where he read bedtime stories in that low voice that rumbled like a warm storm, where he took his last breath. And Daniel spoke of it, as though it were just an asset in an investment portfolio. "I've been thinking," he continued, folding his hands in that careful, deliberate way he always did, when preparing to deliver bad news disguised as logic. "Now that your father's gone, we need to be practical. This house is far too big for you to manage alone." "Alone?" I repeated, confused. "Aren't we?" he interrupted. "No, Clara. I mean for you." It took me a moment to understand. A moment too long. "You can't seriously be talking about moving out," I whispered. "I'm talking about separating," he corrected, as though the precision of the word made it less cruel. "We aren't working. We haven't been working for a long time. Your father passing, it just made things clearer." I felt the world tilt beneath me. "We buried him 3 days ago," I croaked. You're choosing times now, asterisk? I didn't want to make things harder for you during the funeral, he said, as though this was kindness. I waited. He waited. Waited for me to be emotionally broken. Waited for the cracks in me to widen. Waited for the moment I wouldn't have the strength to fight him. You should know, he added casually, that I've already spoken to a solicitor. It's better to handle this properly. A solicitor. A divorce solicitor. My breath caught in my throat. You've already started divorce paperwork. It's the logical thing to do, he said, with the same tone he used when explaining mortgage rates. And since your father left you the house, we need to discuss how it'll be divided. I stared at him. Divided. It's my father's house. Everything acquired during a marriage is shared, he replied smoothly. Legally, it's marital property. We'll sell it and split the proceeds. The tears came hot and fast. Not from heartbreak, from shock, from the coldness of it all. He wasn't grieving my father. He wasn't supporting his wife. He was circling like a shark, waiting for the blood in the water. I'm not signing anything, I said shakily. He smiled. That same smile he used on colleagues, on strangers, on anyone he wanted to manipulate. You will, Clara. You always do. The words landed like a slap, because deep down, I knew he was right. I, had times always bent, always accommodated, always taken responsibility for keeping the peace. But not this time. Something inside me, something buried beneath grief and exhaustion, rose up like a spine of steel. You need to leave, I whispered. He blinked. What? Leave. Get out of this house. He scoffed, as though I were a child throwing a tantrum. This is my home too. You've made it very clear it's not. For a moment, I thought he might soften, that he might realize what he was doing, that maybe humanity would flicker across his face. But instead, he leaned back, crossed his arms, and said the words that confirmed everything my father had feared. You're not thinking straight, Clara, and people who can't think clearly shouldn't be responsible for major financial decisions. There it was, not even disguised, not softened, a direct attack on my mental state, a quiet attempt to build the narrative that I was too fragile to manage my own life, a foundation for something darker. He stood, collected his coat, and as he walked past me he murmured, You'll come around. Just remember, the longer you drag this out, the harder it will be for you. The door closed. I stood alone in the silence he left behind, a silence different from grief. This one was sharp, cold, metallic. It whispered, asterisk, he's not done. He's only getting started, asterisk. Before I continue, if you've ever experienced something similar, a partner choosing your weakest moment to hurt you, to push you, to take advantage of you, share your story below. Your words might be the reason another woman recognizes the warning signs in time. Now, let me tell you, what happened the moment I realized this wasn't just cruelty, it was strategy. People imagine manipulation looks like shouting, slamming doors, shredding clothes, broken plates, dramatic ultimatums. It doesn't. Manipulation, the real kind, the dangerous kind, slips into your life like a cold draft under a closed door. You don't see it. You just wake up one day and realize you're freezing. After Daniel walked out that morning, I expected him to come back with apologies, or excuses, or at least some attempt at reconciliation. But he returned that evening with something far worse. A plan. He walked in carrying 2 folders, sleek, black, expensive looking, and placed them neatly on the dining table, like he was presenting quarterly results to his board. We need to start organizing things, he said plainly. No need to let emotions drag this out. Emotions. My father had been dead less than a week. My grief wasn't even cold. I opened one of the folders. It contained a list of assets. The house, savings, pension projections, valuation, estimates, notes on equity divisions, suggestions for fair settlement. Fair. The word tasted like poison. You've been planning this, I whispered. He didn't deny it. Instead, he circled a line on the document, with the same detachment as a surgeon marking an incision. "The house needs to be sold," he said. "It's the only logical option." "My father died here," I replied. "My childhood is in these walls, and sentiment won't pay a mortgage, Clara." I felt my jaw lock. "We don't have a mortgage." "Exactly," he said, almost smiling. "That's why it's valuable." It hit me then. He saw the house not as a home, but as leverage. He thought grief made me soft. He thought love made me blind. And for years, it had. But not anymore. The next few days unfolded like a slow, suffocating nightmare. Daniel became kinder. Not truly kinder. Strategically kinder. He cooked dinner. He brought flowers. He made small talk about the weather, about work, about nothing at all. To anyone else, it might have looked like reconciliation. But I saw it for what it was. Calibration. He was adjusting himself like a salesman, trying to find the right angle, the perfect tone, the emotional pressure point. Every kindness came with a sting. When I didn't smile enough, "You're shutting me out, Clara." When I didn't respond immediately, "You've been distant for months. This isn't new." When I cried quietly at night, "You're too fragile to make big decisions right now." Too fragile. The phrase began appearing everywhere. In arguments, in offhand comments, through the cracks of conversation. He was building a narrative where I was unstable, where I was incapable, where he was the reasonable, rational one. The kind of narrative a solicitor would love. One night, he sat down beside me on the sofa, placing his hand over mine with rehearsed softness. "I've been thinking," he said. "Maybe you should take some time off work. You're clearly overwhelmed." "I'm grieving, Daniel." "That's not what I mean." He squeezed my hand, too tightly. It hurt. "You're not sleeping. You're not eating. You're crying over the slightest things. If you step back from work, it will make things easier for everyone. For everyone. Not for me." "Are you saying I'm not coping?" I asked. He took a long breath, the kind people take before pretending to be gentle. "I'm saying people who are grieving aren't always reliable. Reliable, fragile, emotional, unstable." The words were lining up like dominoes. I could see exactly where they were falling. "Are you trying to make me look unfit?" I asked quietly. His expression didn't change. Not even a flicker. "Don't be dramatic, Clara." Dramatic. Another domino. When he saw he wasn't getting the reaction he wanted, he shifted tactics. He began questioning my memory. "Did you forget the appointment? You said you'd send that email. I told you this last week. Are you sure you don't remember?" At first, I doubted myself. Grief does strange things to the mind. But then, the inconsistencies appeared. Small, but sharp. Appointments I never agreed to. Conversations that never happened. Emails that didn't exist. He was gaslighting me. Intentionally, methodically, precisely. And I realized something chilling. Daniel wasn't unraveling. He was executing. One afternoon, he came home early, looking irritated. "I spoke to the solicitor again," he said. "We need to provide your mental health history for the settlement review." "My what?" I choked. "Don't act surprised, Clara. They'll ask for it eventually. We need to show we're being transparent." Transparent, as if he hadn't already begun painting me as unstable. "I don't need to justify my mental health to your solicitor," I snapped. He raised an eyebrow. "That attitude won't help you in court." Court. Until that moment, the divorce had been theoretical. Now it felt like a loaded weapon on the table. "Why are you doing this?" I whispered. His smile was thin, almost pitying. "Because you're not thinking clearly, and you're going to make mistakes if someone doesn't guide you." Guide. Control. Own. Everything inside me screamed that he was preparing something much bigger. A financial claim. An instability claim. A capacity claim. A claim that could cost me my father's house. Before I continue, if you've ever had someone try to rewrite your reality, make you question your sanity, turn grief into ammunition, share your story below. You never know who your honesty might save. Now, let me tell you about the unexpected person who stepped into my life. At the exact moment I needed someone to believe me. Some people enter your life gently. A kind word, a quiet gesture, a soft presence. Others arrive like a door being thrown open, in a house filled with smoke. Thomas Bramwell was the second type. The day he called me, I was sitting on the floor of my father's workshop, the one place Daniel hated, the one place he never followed me into. Dust floated lazily in the sunlight. The world felt unbearably still, and grief pressed against my ribs, like a weight I couldn't shift. My phone buzzed. I almost didn't answer, almost let it ring out. But something instinct, fate, or my father's unseen hand made me swipe the screen. Clara Whitmore? The voice was deep, calm, assured. Yes, I managed. This is Thomas Bramwell, your father's solicitor. A strange coldness crawled up my spine. Dad had mentioned Thomas before, an old-fashioned man with old-fashioned principles, but I had never met him. I'm so sorry for your loss, he said gently, but there is something important I need to discuss with you. Your father left instructions, specific instructions. He asked me to contact you only, if your marriage ever showed signs of strain. The room tilted. I gripped the workbench to steady myself. My father said that. Yes, Thomas replied, and he left a sealed envelope. He wrote on it, "Give this to Clara only when she needs protection." Protection. The word hit something deep inside me, something Daniel had been chipping away for weeks. I agreed to meet Thomas the next morning. His office smelled of leather, dust, and old books, a place where truth felt heavier, more permanent. He gestured for me to sit, then placed a sealed brown envelope on the polished oak desk. It was my father's handwriting, untidy, hurried, but unmistakably his. "Before you open it," Thomas said gently, "I need to ask, is everything all right at home?" My throat closed. For a moment, I couldn't speak. Then the truth tumbled out, not smoothly, not gracefully, but in jagged pieces. Daniel's coldness, the divorce folder, the gaslighting, the accusations of fragility, the request for my mental health history, the pressure to sell the house. I expected Thomas to look surprised. He didn't. Instead, he sighed softly, folded his hands, and said, "I feared this." He slid the envelope toward me. "Your father prepared for this possibility." Possibility, not chance, not remote concern. Possibility. My hands shook as I opened it. Inside were three things: a USB drive, a photocopy of my father's updated will, and a handwritten note. "Clara, if you're reading this, it means I was right about him. I wish I wasn't. But you must protect yourself now. Everything you need is on the drive. Don't let grief blind you. You are stronger than you think, Dad." I pressed the paper to my chest. For a moment the room blurred, not from sadness, from validation, from the realization that I hadn't imagined anything. Daniel Times had times been circling, and Dad had seen it long before I did. "Should we look at the drive together?" Thomas asked. I nodded. He inserted it into his computer. A single video file appeared. Recording 2 July, MOV. My father's face filled the screen, tired eyes, worn smile, a look I'd never seen on him before. Worry. "Clara," he said softly, "I don't want to scare you, but Daniel came to see me last week. He asked about the house. He asked how inheritance works, if something were to happen to my health, and if it was possible to transfer the property into both your names." My breath stopped. "I told him no," Dad continued. "I told him the house stays with you, no matter what." He wasn't pleased. "I saw something in him that day, and I didn't like it." Thomas paused the video. "This," he said carefully, "is extremely important. If Daniel attempts to challenge you legally, this recording shows intent, shows he sought information to potentially benefit from your father's estate. It proves premeditation." Premeditation. The word burned through me. This wasn't cruelty. This wasn't emotional distance. This wasn't a marriage falling apart. This was strategy, calculated, deliberate, cold. "What do I do?" I whispered. Thomas leaned forward. "You do nothing publicly. Not yet. You act normal. You gather information. You let him believe. You are vulnerable, distracted, grieving. A bitter laugh slipped out. He already believes that. Good, Thomas said. It will make him careless. Careless. Yes, that was Daniel's flaw. His arrogance. His belief that he was smarter than everyone in the room. He will reveal more, Thomas said. And when he does, we will be ready. A small, unexpected surge of strength rose in me. A solidity I hadn't felt in weeks. Daniel wasn't the only one capable of planning. Clara, Thomas added softly, you're not alone in this. Your father made sure of it. On the walk home, the winter wind cut through my coat. But for the first time since Dad died, I didn't feel hollow. I felt anchored, prepared, seen. Daniel wanted a weak woman, but he had no idea. He was about to face a prepared one. Before I continue, if you've ever had someone underestimate your strength, someone who mistook your silence for surrender, tell me below. You never know whose courage you might spark. Now let me tell you how I began to play Daniel's game better than he ever expected. There is a strange kind of power in letting someone believe they've already defeated you. The moment Thomas told me, you must act as though you know nothing, I felt something shift inside me, not confidence exactly, but a sense of purpose that grief had stolen from me. If Daniel wanted to hunt, then he would hunt a version of me, so harmless, so pliable. He'd never see the trap until it snapped shut. I began the performance that same evening. When Daniel came home late, coat still smelling of laundry detergent, I didn't buy. Wine stain on his cuff I didn't recognize. I did not question him. I simply said, "Rough day?" His eyes lit up. Not with affection, but with relief. Relief that I wasn't going to fight him. Relief that the woman before him was manageable again. "Yes," he said, dropping his keys loudly on the table. "You've been distant, and I need you to try harder, Clara. Try harder." The audacity made my stomach twist, but I lowered my gaze and nodded. "I'm sorry," I whispered. "I'll do better." He exhaled dramatically, like a hero tolerating a fragile wife. In reality, I was watching him more closely than I had watched anything in my life. Over the next week, I continued the charade. I let him see me distracted, let him believe I was grieving to the point of confusion. I forgot small things on purpose, left the boiler running, misplaced my keys, asked him to help me understand simple paperwork. He thrived on it. Every instance fed his ego, convinced him I was slipping out of my own skin. "That's why we need to sell the house," he said one morning, as he buttered toast like he owned the kitchen. "You can't manage things on your own, darling. It's too much for you." Darling. The word sounded poisonous now. I took a measured breath. "Maybe you're right." His satisfaction was immediate and ugly. Meanwhile, I met with Thomas twice a week. We documented everything. His sudden interest in financial accounts, his questions about probate timelines, his attempts to pressure me to sign temporary agreements, his comments about how overwhelmed I was. Thomas kept repeating, "Let him talk. The more he believes you're weak, the bolder he will become." He was right. Daniel began dropping his mask altogether. He stayed out later. He hid his phone less carefully. He forgot to clear messages on his smartwatch. He took calls in the kitchen, calls where he whispered plans that had nothing to do with me. I couldn't hear the words, but the tone said enough. One night, I heard him say, "Once everything is settled, we'll have the down payment sorted. She won't fight it. She, not Clara, not my wife, just an obstacle." The next phase of the performance was harder. I had to pretend to trust him again, so I cooked his favorite dinner, laughed at jokes he recycled from colleagues, let him explain simple bank forms, as if I were a schoolgirl. And every time I did, a tiny part of me died. Not because I felt weak, but because he believed my weakness so eagerly. One evening, he sat across from me with a glass of wine and tapped the table softly. "Clara, I've been thinking, maybe it's better if I handle the finances for now, just until you're stable." Stable. My blood ran cold, but I kept my voice gentle. "That might be good," I said. "You've always been better with numbers." He smiled warmly. The kind of smile that would fool a stranger, not me. Then came the slip, the one Thomas predicted. Daniel left his laptop open, something he never did. On the screen was a draft email, addressed to a mortgage advisor, about future investment potential, once probate funds are accessible. Probate funds, my father's money. Money he had already allocated to himself. My hands trembled, not with fear, but with fury so sharp, it almost felt clean. But fury wasn't part of the performance, so I simply closed the laptop and pretended nothing happened. Because the truth was clear. Daniel was no longer speculating. He was planning. The most difficult moment came 3 nights later. We were in the living room, fire crackling weakly in the grate. I had just come back from sorting Dad's workshop. Daniel sat beside me, pretending to watch a documentary, but glancing at me every few seconds. Finally, he said, "You know, it's probably time you let go of that place. Your father wouldn't want you hurting yourself over dusty old memories." I turned to him slowly. Dad loved that workshop. Daniel's jaw tightened. "And he's gone, Clara. You need to stop clinging. It's not healthy." Healthy. He had used that word often recently, a calculated push toward the idea that I was fragile, unstable, unfit. I swallowed. "I'll think about it." His smile widened. He believed he was molding me back into the compliant woman he needed. But inside me, something was crystallizing, solid, unshakable. He couldn't see it. He couldn't feel it. And that was the advantage. Before I continue, if you've ever had to pretend you were smaller so someone wouldn't see you preparing to rise, tell me below. Your strength might be the reminder someone else needs tonight. Things escalated the following morning. Daniel knocked on the bathroom door as I brushed my hair. "Clara, I need you to look over something." He handed me a thin stack of papers. "What is it?" I asked innocently. "Just a small authorization form," he said casually. "It'll help me manage the estate paperwork for you." Estate. Not times my father's times estate. Not times our loss. Asterisk. Just estate. I flipped the first page. Legal jargon. Power of attorney terms tucked between lines. He was asking for control. Control of everything, including me. "Do you want me to sign now?" I asked quietly. His eyes flashed with triumph. "Yes. Best to get it sorted." I smiled weakly and placed the papers on the counter. "Let me just shower first," I murmured. He walked away, satisfied. But the moment he closed the door, I took a photo of every page and sent them to Thomas. Within minutes, he replied, "Asterisk, asterisk, do not sign. This is a covert transfer of authority. The trap is setting itself. Stay calm." "We're nearly there. Asterisk, asterisk. Nearly there." Daniel thought he was tightening the net around me. He didn't realize. He had stepped into mine. And now, it was only a matter of time before everything snapped shut. There is a moment, just before a trap snaps shut, when the creature still believes it's free. Daniel lived inside that moment for far too long. And I let him. I let him think he was winning. Let him pace around the house with a confidence that didn't belong to him. Let him correct my mistakes. Let him pat my shoulder like I was a wounded bird. Let him speak of the future as if he already owned it. Because the truth was simple. The more certain he felt, the more careless he became. And careless men always bury themselves. The showdown began with a text from Thomas. Asterisk, asterisk. We're ready. Bring him tomorrow. Let him believe it's a discussion about probate. Asterisk, asterisk. Probate. The word had become Daniel's lifeline, the invisible rope pulling him toward the wealth he believed he deserved. So I approached him that evening, with the softness he expected. "Thomas wants to meet," I said, while Daniel scrolled through his phone, barely looking up. "He said we should finalize the inheritance paperwork." His head snapped up. That word inheritance was cocaine to him. "When?" he asked too quickly. "Tomorrow morning." He masked his excitement poorly. A nod that was almost a tremor. A breath that came too fast. "Good. Yes. We should get everything sorted." sorted, as if sorting meant carving up. My father's life and legacy, like a business deal. Thomas's office the next morning felt different. Not warmer, not colder, just charged. Like static in the air before lightning strikes. He greeted us politely and gestured to the conference table. Daniel walked in with the swagger of a man approaching his winnings. He didn't notice the second solicitor, sitting quietly in the corner, or the neatly arranged files, or the digital recorder already primed. But Thomas noticed everything. "Thank you both for coming," he began. "As mentioned, we'll be discussing the division of assets following Mr. Whitmore's passing." Daniel leaned back, a picture of confidence. "Yes, I think it's important. We reach an agreement fairly." Fairly. That word again. It soured in the air. Thomas opened the first folder calmly, revealing a stack of documents, with bold legal headers. "Before we talk numbers," he said, "there are several key points we need to clarify." Daniel waved his hand. Sure, as long as we get an equal division of the inheritance." Thomas didn't even blink. There will be no division. Silence. The kind that chills a room down to its bones. Daniel blinked, then laughed. A nervous, confused laugh. "Sorry, what?" Thomas folded his hands. "Your wife's inheritance is not marital property, Mr. Ashford." Daniel stared at him, then at me, then back at him. "That's not possible. Inheritance during marriage is shared, everyone knows that." "Not in this case," Thomas replied, "because your father-in-law established an irrevocable inheritance trust 6 months before his passing." The colour drained from Daniel's face. Thomas continued, unbothered. "This trust places all assets outside the marital estate, legally, ethically, and permanently." Daniel's voice cracked. No, that can't be right. She told me, she said." He looked at me like I'd stabbed him. I simply lowered my eyes, as though embarrassed. Thomas slid the trust document across the table. "You may review it." Daniel's hands shook as he skimmed the pages. His confusion transformed into disbelief, disbelief into panic, panic into rage. "This is illegal," he shouted. "This is manipulation. Her father did this because he hated me." Thomas raised one eyebrow. Did he? Or did he foresee something? He tapped the table lightly. "Let's find out." He opened another folder. The room shifted. Out came the USB video. Out came the transcript. Out came the record of Daniel's visit to my father's home. Daniel froze. No air, no words, just stillness. "During this visit," Thomas continued, "you asked explicitly about transferring the Whitmore property into your name. You also inquired about how inheritance might pass if Mr. Whitmore's health declined." Daniel's face went chalk white. I never. That video. "It's taken out of context." Thomas pressed play. My father's voice filled the room. Daniel asked how fast the house could be transferred, if anything happened to me. Daniel stood up so suddenly. His chair crashed backwards. "Turn it off. This is insane." Thomas did not turn it off. In the video, my father looked directly into the camera. "I hope I'm wrong about him, but Clara needs protection." The sound of my father saying my name broke something open in me. But in Daniel, it did the opposite. It cracked him. "You set me up," he hissed at me. "You and your father. You planned this." I finally lifted my gaze. Calm, grounded, finished with fear. "No, Daniel," I said quietly. "You planned this." We simply watched. He lunged toward the documents, as if grabbing them could change the truth. "None of this will stand in court." Thomas slid yet another file forward. A printed copy of the email draft. Daniel wrote to the mortgage advisor. His voice died in his throat. "This," Thomas said, "demonstrates intent to profit from probate funds that were never his." Daniel sank back into his chair, breathing hard. "This isn't happening," he whispered. "She's mine. Her inheritance. It was supposed to be." He stopped. Thomas closed the folder gently. "You have shown, repeatedly and clearly, that your interest was not in your marriage, but in your wife's future assets. Legally, morally, and factually, you have no claim here. Daniel's eyes darted around the room, searching for an exit that did not exist. He finally looked at me. "You knew," he whispered. "You knew. And you let me. You let me talk. You let me think." "That's the thing about masks," I said softly. "They always slip. If you push someone hard enough." Before I continue, if you have ever watched someone reveal their true colors when they believed they were winning, you are not alone. Tell me below. Your story might help someone recognize the danger they're living with. Daniel was defeated. But defeat wasn't enough, because men like him don't vanish quietly. And I would soon discover that humiliation was only the beginning of his retaliation. There's a very particular look a man gets when he realizes the world he built in his head has just collapsed in front of him. It's not anger at first. It's disbelief, raw, panicked disbelief. A child realizing the monster under the bed is real, and he's the monster. That was Daniel, when we left Thomas's office. But disbelief doesn't last. For men like him, it curdles quickly into something far more dangerous. Retaliation. He didn't speak to me in the car, didn't look at me. His jaw was locked, his fingers wrapped tight around the steering wheel, as though he needed something to crush. When we reached the house, he slammed the door so hard, the neighbor's dog began barking. I walked inside slowly, my pulse whispering warnings under my skin. Daniel paced the living room like a trapped animal, muttering under his breath. Finally, he spun toward me. "You humiliated me." I didn't answer. "You let that old man talk to me like I was some criminal." Still, I said nothing. His fury sharpened. "You pretended to be weak. You tricked me. Do you think that makes you clever, Clara?" I lifted my chin. "I didn't have to trick you, Daniel. You showed your intentions yourself." Something in his face snapped. "Everything you have, everything, should have been ours. You owe me that. I carried this marriage. I put up with you. I stayed out of loyalty." My voice finally stirred. "Loyalty is not what you stayed for." He stepped closer, too close. "You think this is over? You think a few papers and some stupid trust can stop me getting what I deserve?" A cold shiver ran through me, but I held my ground. "Leave, Daniel." He stared at me for a long, terrible moment. Then he stormed out, slamming the front door so hard. The frame juddered. For 2 days, there was silence. Thomas warned me, silence from a man like him is not peace. It's preparation. He was right. Because the retaliation began subtly, my phone vibrated at midnight. Unknown number. "You ruined my life. Now watch what I do to yours." I blocked it. Another message came from a different number. "You think you're safe? You're not." Blocked again. Then came the email, a long, rambling tirade, sent to my work address, accusing me of mental instability, financial manipulation, emotional cruelty. He copied the school's general mailbox. By morning, my head teacher pulled me aside. "Clara, is everything all right at home?" My cheeks burned with shame. Not because of the accusations, but because his smear campaign was working. Seeds had been planted. Questions were forming. Thomas told me, "This is textbook. When abusers lose control privately, they try to regain it publicly." He prepared a response for the school, factual and firm. My head teacher apologized, but damage, emotional damage lingered. The next attack came faster. I returned from work to find the bins tipped over, the garden gate wide open, the back door handle scratched, as though someone had tried to force it. Nothing inside the house was disturbed, nothing stolen. A message, not a robbery. I reported it to the police. They noted it with concern, but no actionable evidence. Thomas was furious. "He's testing boundaries. This will escalate." He was right again. 2 evenings later, I arrived home and froze. The hallway smelled faintly of his cologne. A smell I once found comforting, now felt like a warning. Then I saw it. My father's framed photograph, the one on the entry table, had been smashed. Not knocked off by accident, deliberately shattered. Glass scattered like ice. My knees weakened. My breath vanished. He'd been inside. He'd walked through the house I no longer felt safe in. Every shadow suddenly looked like him. My hands shook as I called the police. They came quickly this time. They saw the damage. They listened. They took notes more seriously now. But without proof, they couldn't arrest him. He likely still has a key, one officer said gently. Stay with someone you trust tonight. I packed a bag with trembling fingers and drove to my friend Emily's. Emily held me tightly at the door. What did he do? She whispered. I couldn't answer, because the truth tasted too much like fear. That night, as I lay awake in her spare room, I realized something important. Daniel wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying to punish. Punish me for being smarter than he expected. Punish me for refusing to play the weak wife. Punish me for daring to expose him. Thomas called the next morning. Clara, we must file for a restraining order immediately. This is no longer a divorce case. This is a safety case. I swallowed hard. Do you think he'll stop? Thomas hesitated. A man who feels entitled does not cope well. When the world proves him wrong, he will try to reclaim power. We must take yours back first. Before I continue, if you've ever seen someone become more dangerous, the moment you stopped being easy to control, I'm sorry, you didn't deserve it. Tell me below if you understand this feeling. No one should face it alone. Because Daniel was far from done, and the next line he crossed would change everything. Not just legally, but criminally. There's a point in every story of fear where something shifts. Not because the danger disappears, but because someone finally sees it with you. For weeks, it had felt like I was shouting underwater. Everyone heard sounds, but no one understood the words. That changed the night Daniel went too far. I had been staying at Emily's for 3 days. Her spare room was small, a single bed, 2 old lamps, a window overlooking terraced houses. But it felt safer than my own home. Or so I thought. At 2:17 a.m., a violent banging shook the front door. Emily bolted upright. My heart punched against my ribs. 3 more bangs, harder this time. Then a voice. Clara, open the door. Daniel. Emily grabbed my hand. Don't move. My entire body trembled. Not because he was furious. I'd seen that before. But because this was different. This was desperation. A man who felt the world slipping away and wanted to drag someone down with him. He kept shouting. Threats. Insults. Promises that he would finish what he started. A neighbor across the street turned on their light. Then another. Curtains shifted. Someone whispered, Is that Daniel Ashford? Within minutes, a woman 3 houses down yelled from her window, Leave her alone or I'm calling the police. Daniel kicked the door hard enough that the frame rattled. Emily squeezed my arm. I'm calling 999. Her voice was steady. Mine wasn't. I felt like a child again, helpless, small, cornered. But this time, someone else stood beside me. Police sirens approached within minutes. Blue lights painted the walls as officers rushed toward the house. Daniel stepped back, startled, like a predator caught under a spotlight. 2 officers confronted him immediately. Sir, step away from the property. Hands where we can see them. His mask cracked. This is my wife. She's manipulating all of you. You don't understand. I have rights. The officers remained calm. You were warned previously. You are in breach of boundaries. We need to speak with you. Daniel's rage erupted. She belongs to me. Everything she has should have been mine. Her father poisoned her against me. The words echoed down the street. A confession shouted in front of half the neighborhood. Phones were recording. Faces were watching from windows. Daniel lost control of the narrative. In a single breath, the officers stepped closer, firm. Sir, you need to calm down. This behavior is unacceptable. I don't care. He lunged forward. That was it. He was handcuffed in seconds. Not gently, not politely. And for the first time, Daniel looked small, truly small. Inside the house, I collapsed onto Emily's couch. The lead officer knelt beside me. "Miss Whitmore, we're issuing an emergency protective order tonight. You're not safe until this is formalized." Emily rubbed my back as I tried to steady my breathing. I wasn't crying out of fear this time. I was crying because the world finally believed me. The next morning, Thomas arrived at Emily's house with a stack of documents and a look I'd never seen on him before, a look of sharpened resolve. "Clara," he said gently, "Daniel crossed several lines last night. We now have enough to secure a formal restraining order, police support, and emergency court action." For once, I didn't feel powerless. I nodded. "Let's do whatever it takes." We spent hours compiling police incident reports, recordings from neighbors, screenshots of threatening messages, photos of the damaged frame at my house, the smashed portrait of Dad, witness statements from Emily and 2 neighbors. Thomas organized them like pieces of a puzzle. "Individually," he said, "they're concerning. Together, they form a clear pattern of escalation." Then he added something else. "We'll also request temporary sole occupancy of your home. Daniel will be legally barred from coming near the property." My breath hitched. The house wasn't just bricks and mortar. It was Dad. It was memories. It was everything Daniel tried to take. "Do you think the court will approve it?" I asked. Thomas didn't hesitate. "They'd be negligent not to." The hearing was held that same afternoon, in a small courtroom in Leeds Magistrates' Court. I expected a battle. I expected Daniel to arrive, ready to twist the story, ready to cry victimhood. But he didn't come. He was still in custody for violent disorder and attempted forced entry. The judge reviewed the evidence quietly, page after page, photo after photo, report after report. Finally, she looked up. "Miss Whitmore, the court recognizes the clear and present danger posed by Mr. Ashford. We are granting you a full non-molestation order, a restraining order, and temporary exclusive occupation of your home." My lungs finally expanded after weeks of tightness. The judge added, "You acted bravely coming forward. This level of escalation is serious, and you have our full protection." I didn't realize how much I needed those words from someone in authority until they landed. Outside the courtroom, Thomas closed the folder and smiled faintly. "You're not alone anymore, Clara. Not legally, not socially, not practically." I looked around the atrium, Emily waiting near the benches, a neighbor who came to testify giving me a small nod, even a police liaison officer offering reassurance. The community I thought wouldn't care, cared. Maybe not because they knew me, but because they recognized danger and refused to look away. Before I continue, if you've ever been in a situation where no one believed you, and then suddenly, finally, someone did, you know how life-saving that moment is. If you understand that feeling, drop a comment below. Someone reading might need that courage too. Daniel was legally restrained now, but the story wasn't finished, because what comes after protection is accountability, and Daniel's reckoning was still waiting just around the corner. There's a strange kind of silence that follows danger, a silence so sharp it feels like it's waiting for something. For the first time in months, that silence didn't terrify me. It felt like the world holding its breath, waiting for justice to land. And it did. Daniel's court date arrived quicker than anyone expected. His charges, forced entry, criminal damage, harassment, and breach of preliminary warnings, were heavy enough that the magistrates refused to delay proceedings. Thomas met me outside the courthouse. He looked calmer than I felt. "Clara," he said softly, "today isn't about revenge. It's about restoration. It's about you reclaiming your life." I nodded, though my hands were trembling. I wasn't trembling out of fear anymore, but out of the weight of finality. Inside the courtroom, Daniel sat on the opposite bench, in a navy jumper that looked borrowed, hair unkempt, eyes hollow. When he saw me, something flickered across his face. Not love, not regret, but disbelief. Disbelief that the woman who once bent was now standing upright. He looked like a man who could not recognize the consequences he'd crafted with his own hands. The prosecutor laid out the evidence succinctly. The 999 call recordings, the videos from neighbors, photographs of the damage, the threatening messages, witness statements, Daniel's attempted forced entry, his verbal outburst caught on multiple phone cameras. Every detail was a nail sealing a coffin he had built himself. Daniel's solicitor attempted a weary defense. Mr. Ashford was overwhelmed emotionally. He acted out of distress, not malice. He had no intent to harm. The judge raised a hand, stopping him. Intent becomes irrelevant when the actions place someone in danger. Then the judge turned to Daniel. Mr. Ashford, you behaved with deliberate aggression. You terrorized your estranged wife, ignored police warnings, damaged property, and attempted to force your way into a residence where you were not permitted to be. This court recognizes not only the emotional harm, but the physical threat your actions posed. Daniel swallowed hard. He wasn't smiling anymore. Then came the sentencing. The courtroom felt airless. For the offences presented, the judge said firmly, this court issues the following: a 12-month suspended sentence, 200 hours of community service, mandatory behavioral rehabilitation, a permanent restraining order lasting 5 years, and full financial responsibility for all damages caused. A times 5 year times restraining order. 5 years of peace, 5 years of air, 5 years of knowing he couldn't legally step near me without consequences. I exhaled for the first time. Since the rose-colored veneer of our relationship shattered, outside, Daniel tried to approach me. Before the officers blocked his path, he stared at me with a face I couldn't read anymore. Maybe anger, maybe confusion, maybe the first hint of understanding that he had lost not just access to me, but control over me. Clara, he began. I didn't respond, not with words, not with acknowledgement. Silence was the closure I chose. He was escorted away, and for the first time, his absence didn't leave an emptiness. It created space. Thomas led me outside, where the grey lead sky felt brighter than usual. You did it, he said. I only guided you. You faced him. You stood your ground. It didn't feel like standing my ground. It felt like reclaiming ground I didn't realize I'd lost year after year. We walked towards the steps and found a small group waiting. Emily, 2 neighbors who testified, and a few people from the community who had followed the case, because they believed no woman should walk through something like this alone. Emily hugged me so tightly. I nearly broke again, but this time from gratitude. You're safe now, she whispered. You're truly safe. That evening, I returned to my own house, for the first time since the attack. The repairs were complete, the walls repainted, the broken portrait of Dad replaced with a framed copy of the original photo Emily had saved on her phone. But the air felt different, lighter, mine. I walked room to room, touching surfaces, like someone reacquainting herself with a place she once loved, but had been too afraid to enter. In the living room, I stood where Daniel had shouted, where he had raged, where he had tried to tear apart the last pieces of me. Now, it was quiet. Now it was whole. Now it was mine again. Before I end this part of the story, let me say this. If you've ever walked into a courtroom shaking, thinking you were the weak one, only to realize you were the evidence of your own strength, you understand this moment. If you've lived through something like this, share a line below. Someone scrolling at 2 a.m. might find the courage they need in your words. Justice didn't erase what happened. It didn't erase the fear, the nights of shaking hands, the echoes of his voice. But justice created something new, a boundary he could no longer cross, a life he could no longer disrupt, a future he could no longer sabotage. And as I locked the door that night, heeding no footsteps behind me, no shadows lurking, no threats waiting, I finally felt it. Victory. Not loud, not triumphant in a cinematic way, but quiet, steady, undeniable. The kind that doesn't shout, I won, but instead whispers, I'm free. People think healing comes in a single moment. A switch flicked, a door opened, a sunrise wiping away the darkness. But the truth? Healing arrives quietly, in fragments, and it rarely announces itself. You only notice it the day you realize you're breathing differently. That day arrived for me slowly, over cups of tea, over freshly painted walls, over mornings where my hands finally stopped shaking. In the weeks after the court ruling, my home became my sanctuary again. I repainted the living room myself, sunlit cream instead of the dull grey Daniel once insisted on, because lighter tones make a house look cheap. Funny, isn't it? The moment he was gone, the house felt richer than ever. Emily came over with rollers and music, and far too much enthusiasm for interior decorating. Fresh walls, she said. Fresh start. We laughed more than we painted, and somewhere between splash marks on the floor and the smell of new paint drying, I felt something in me uncoil. Thomas checked in regularly, not as a solicitor, but as someone who understood that the end of danger doesn't immediately mean peace. You don't have to rush, he told me. Recovery isn't linear. I half smiled. Nothing in my life ever has been. He gave me a soft look. Perhaps now it finally can be. His kindness wasn't loud. It was steady, something I wasn't used to. And steadiness, I learned, is its own kind of safety. One morning, I opened the wardrobe and found a coat I hadn't worn in years. Daniel hated it, said it made me look old-fashioned and unpolished. I slipped it on. It still fit. It still felt like me. I walked to the bakery down the street, bought a croissant, sat by the window, and watched people hurry to work. And for the first time in a very long time, I wasn't rushing anywhere. I wasn't bracing for someone's mood. I wasn't tiptoeing through my own life. I was simply existing, and that felt revolutionary. Healing also came in slower, heavier ways. Some nights, I still woke to echoes of Daniel's voice. Some days, a slammed car door outside made my heart spike. And sometimes, when I walked into my house, I half expected chaos. But each time, I found the same thing: quiet, order, safety. The absence of harm became its own kind of comfort. I returned to work after a month of leave. My colleagues welcomed me with warmth that nearly unraveled me. One of them, Mrs. Ellington, pressed my hands between hers. "You've gone through fire, sweetheart," she said, "and you've come out tempered, not broken." Teaching again felt healing too. Children have a way of softening sharp edges. They don't see trauma. They see the person standing in front of them. And standing in front of them, I realized I'd survived something I once believed would swallow me whole. I also made a decision I'd put off for years. I applied for a professional development program I had always wanted to pursue. One Daniel told me was a waste of time because you're already doing enough. He never meant enough. He meant, don't outgrow me. Submitting that application felt like reclaiming a part of myself I didn't know had been locked away. When the acceptance email arrived, I cried. Not because I doubted I deserved it, but because I finally believed I did. Healing isn't only internal. Sometimes it shows up in the world around you. My neighbors, the same ones who filmed Daniel's outburst, invited me for dinner the following month. "We thought you might like some company," Mr. Lawson said shyly. We sat around a wooden table, ate roasted chicken and potatoes, and talked about mundane things: weather, football, garden fences, topics so normal. They soothed me more than any therapy session could. Community doesn't always come the way you expect. Sometimes it arrives in simple forms: a shared meal, an open door, a warm smile from people who witnessed your worst day and still chose to stand beside you. One of my most profound healing moments happened entirely by accident. I was cleaning the loft when I found a dusty old box, labeled in my father's handwriting. Inside were things Daniel never knew existed: my childhood drawings, Dad's watch, a postcard from Whitby he once sent Mum, and a small leather-bound notebook. In it, he'd written letters, intended for me as an adult. Letters about resilience, kindness, courage, and knowing when to walk away from someone who diminishes you. One line hit me so hard, I had to sit down. Love should make room for you, Clara, not shrink you. I pressed the notebook to my chest and cried, not out of grief, but out of recognition. Dad had known the kind of woman he wanted me to become. And for the first time, I felt like I was finally becoming her. Gradually, I created routines of my own. Evening walks around the neighborhood, Sunday breakfasts with Emily, journaling before bed, yoga videos that made me laugh at my lack of balance, fresh flowers on the dining table every Friday. Small things, but healing hides in small things. And then came the moment I didn't expect. I looked at myself in the mirror one morning, hair undone, pajamas wrinkled, eyes sleepy, and I realized I liked the woman staring back at me. Not because she was perfect, not because she was healed entirely, but because she had stayed alive, stayed hopeful, stayed fighting. Even on the days she believed she wouldn't make it. She wasn't the version of me Daniel tried to mold. She wasn't the fearful shadow I'd become. She was someone new, someone real, someone whole. Before I end this chapter, if you're somewhere in the middle of your own healing, not at the beginning, not at the end, but trudging through the messy, silent middle, I see you. Leave a comment if you've ever gone through your own version of rebuilding. Your story might be the light someone else needs tonight. And this is how rebirth really looks. Not loud, not dramatic, not wrapped in cinematic triumph, but quiet, steady, intentional. 1,000 small choices leading you back to yourself. A life rebuilt, not in spite of what happened, but because you chose to rise anyway. When I look back now, the strangest thing is not the fear I survived, or the battles I fought. It's how quietly strength arrived, when I thought I had none left. If there is one truth this journey carved into me, it is this. Real love protects. Real love never asks you to shrink. Real love doesn't twist your fears into weapons against you. And when something or someone forces you to dim yourself just to keep the peace, that isn't love. That is captivity disguised as affection. What my father wrote in his old notebook has become my compass now. Love should make room for you, Clara, not shrink you. And so here I am, standing in a life I rebuilt with my own hands, not flawless, not perfect, but wholly mine. A life where safety isn't borrowed, where peace isn't conditional, and where the woman in the mirror finally feels like someone worth choosing every single day. If you're listening to this right now, and you feel small, or scared, or unsure whether you deserve better, you do. You always have. You always will. And if you've walked through something similar, or you're still somewhere in the middle of the storm, leave a comment below. Your story might be the lifeline someone else grabs onto tonight. Remember this, whoever you are not alone. You are not weak. And your voice, your truth, matters more than you know.